Good morning, everyone. We might get started. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know you've all got very busy lives and many other things that you could be doing, but I know you're going to find this session as fascinating and worthwhile as anything. So welcome to the 2025 Power Hour series. We're really excited to be hosting the fourth virtual forum today with the topic of rethinking renewables and development challenges. As you guys all know, across Australia, the energy shift is reshaping regional communities. It's bringing both enormous challenges and opportunities. We know these communities aren't just hosting the infrastructure, they're actually going through a massive change. They're navigating deep social, economic, and environmental changes. So, as the momentum builds, so does the need for us to engage more effectively and respectfully and genuinely build partnerships with the people who are hosting this transition and doing the heavy lifting and keeping people at the heart. So we know this is really complex work and we know there's excellent work and practice happening all around the country. But as Tony Marr did remind us in episode 19 of the Empower podcast, many communities still really feel like the transition is happening to them and not with them. And this really is our challenge. That's why we're here. This series is all about lifting the bar. We're bringing you some bold ideas and fresh perspectives alongside the voices of real people from regional Australia. We really want to support you, challenge your thinking, and help shape better outcomes on the ground ultimately. So today we're exploring a topic that we just think doesn't get discussed enough, and it is really important. We're going to ask ourselves two questions today. What does infrastructure development and construction mean for people living and working in the communities where the projects take place? And importantly, how can we do better to set up both the project and those intergenerational relationships for long-term success? I'm Wendy Agar from Engaged Outcomes, and I'm so delighted to have you here today. This is a power hour. It is 60 minutes of awesomeness from our speakers. We're going to kick off with a keynote from Warwick Squire, who's the CEO of Co-Existence Queensland, and follow that up with our expert panellists, Gary Lees, who is the Head of Regional Development and Relations for RELA and a host landholder, and Dana Boxall, who's the General Manager of Community and Delivery Services for Powerlink. Before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you today from the land of the Turrbal and Yagara people, and I'd like to extend that respect to all people on the call who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owner of the lands where you're joining us from and pay my respects to them, their culture, and to their elders past and present. I can't go any further without doing a huge thank you to my 2025 series partners, Powerlink and Westwind, for believing in this work, sharing the vision, and backing these honest conversations about what it takes to partner with communities and to stand alongside them ultimately to shape a better future. At Engaged Outcomes, we're on a mission to improve the way engagement is done in regional Australia, and we're really proud that our Power Hour series creates a space for real conversations, and we hope that you leave inspired with a few new perspectives and hopefully some practical strategies for your engagement toolbox. So now, before we go on, a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this call, so please keep your camera off if that's a concern for you. Please, as everyone knows, stay on mute unless you're talking, but keep your cameras on. We do love to see you. Now, this is an interactive hour. We want your feedback. We want your questions. We look forward to your chat in the chat box. We are using Zoom, so some people are not familiar. Unlike Teams, it's down, the bar is down the bottom and your chat box is just there beside the emojis. So we would love you to kick off by putting in the chat where you're coming in from, and you could even stick an emoji in there and how you're feeling today. We do have a really packed schedule and we have fantastic speakers. So while you're doing that, I am going to go straight into our keynote. We're so lucky to have Warwick Squire here. Warwick, many of you will know, if you're in Queensland, he's the Chief Executive Officer of Co-Existence Queensland. And he's spent 20 years, or over 20 years, sorry, Warwick, working across government and regional Queensland, building strong practical relationships in communities with landholders and with energy and resource companies. He's worked across departments in Queensland, including natural resources and mine, water planning, primary industries, and local government. And this gives him a deep understanding of how development really impacts people on the ground. In his current role, Warwick leads collaborative projects that support coexistence, drawing on his experience handling complaints and concerns from communities over a decade of the CS coal seam gas boom and now through the renewable energy transition. Backed by qualifications in urban and regional planning and environmental science, he's driven by practical solutions-focused leadership, helping teams and communities navigate complex projects. This is why he's the absolutely perfect keynote for us today. Welcome, Warwick.
Thanks, Wendy. And just a disclaimer, yes, I am a qualified town planner, but I'm reformed. So. Look, thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to the group, Wendy. It's great to see such a large audience and diverse audience, and it's a pleasure and a unique opportunity to come and talk to you. I'm just going to see if I can get the tech working for me. And I've only got 15 minutes, which is a little bit of time to share a little bit of knowledge in this area, hopefully. As Wendy says, I've been working for far too long in the space of coexistence, dealing with complex interactions between the resources sector, the energy sector, and community. I bear many scars from these interactions over the years, but I've also hopefully a number of proud achievements in that time. Today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the role of Coexistence Queensland, a bit of context around the importance of community, particularly in that realm of development and construction. And I'm just going to, if you'll indulge me, talk a little bit about some of the observations that I and the organisation is making around opportunities and challenges in this space. And hopefully that'll feed the conversation for the further panel members, particularly Gary and Dana, who I've been lucky to work closely with over a number of years, and I'm sure that they will make up for any shortcomings in entertainment in my presentation. All right, let's see. Just checking everyone can see the presentation. All good?
All good.
I just can't move in it. All right. Just want to echo Wendy's acknowledgement of country there and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging on the land we meet, and acknowledging any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. Just a very quick context of Coexistence Queensland. I'm going to whip through this quickly and assume some knowledge. We are an independent statutory body that has just celebrated our first birthday as Coexistence Queensland. But prior to that, we'd been operating for 10 years as the Gasfield Commission Queensland. I'm really working in that space of coexistence and community during the boom of the gas industry across the Surat Basin. We were put in place as an independent stat body by government at a time where there were significant concerns in community around the growth of that particular form of development, and our purpose really was to be injected in there to manage and improve those coexistence outcomes between landholders, rural and regional communities, and the gas sector. And we're now doing that with the broader remit across the broad resources and energy sector, including renewable energy. Our role is an interesting one in that we are a joiner, we are a collaborator. We bring everyone into the room together to work through what are very complex coexistence opportunities and challenges. We work across industry, community and landholders, and we like to think of ourselves as supporting communities that are experiencing change and transition. We do this in a number of ways. Importantly, we're not a regulator. We're not a statutory entity in that sense. We don't make decisions around development. We very much come into the fray when those decisions around development have been made. and we're looking at facilitating balanced and socially responsible development in those instances. We do this by focusing on provision of independent information to landholders and community. How do they interact with an industry? What are their rights? How do they get good outcomes in their interactions? Partnering with other groups and government, other entities to deliver programs that support landholders and communities that are experiencing change. And really importantly, we're out there a lot. I do a lot of Ks, and one of the things an important role that we play is to be that ear to the ground. What's going on in community? What are those touch points? And we're taking those, and we're up the road at 1 William Street advising government, we're advising industry and influencers in the area about what's happening out there and what we think needs to change and what's going well. I just want to talk a little bit about communities at the core, and this is a principle that I always talk about when I'm presenting to groups, because ultimately communities are pivotal to the success of energy and resources projects. Without buy-in of community, projects are at risk, and that is the key message here. Communities are not just stakeholders, they are long-term project partners, and without good relationships built on a foundation of mutually beneficial outcomes, coexistence can't be achieved and social license falters. When I first started working in the space of coexistence, we were talking about things like mitigating impact, no net impact on communities and landholders. So it was very much about a frame of reference that was statutorily based. Okay, well, we got an industry moving in, just make sure you minimise the impact. We've moved beyond that sort of frame of reference now to where it's all about mutually beneficial outcomes. It's leave it better than when you came, is what I say. And I think that's a very important distinction, because for me, that's where the social license element comes in. In the gas and resources sector, we move from a bare bones compliance approach to something that is significantly above, or community expectations are that behaviour is significantly above compliance. And that ultimately means that we can equitably share what is a complex landscape out there. When I was putting this presentation together, there's a number of slides where I thought, geez, I'm repeating myself. But I think it is important to emphasise, particularly with the topic we're talking about here in the development context, how important connection is. First impressions matter. One of the first ever interactions I had with a landholder who dealt with a gas company was out in the Strat Basin, and I was sitting down at his kitchen table having a cup of tea, and he told me the story of the approach. And the gas company first interaction with the landholder had come in, slapped a map down on the table of one of his paddocks with a plan of operations, a number of wells, $1 value on compensation, and said, look, sign here or I'll see you in court. Now I can tell you, 15 years later, a gas company has never ever approached that landholder again due to the words that were uttered to that particular land access person when that interaction happened. So first impressions matter. It sets the tone for the interactions and the relationship across a project life, and they can make or break a project. But partnerships endure, and those relationships are very much not set and forget. And I think what we're talking about here is about how do you maintain the longevity of partnership and relationship across the project cycle. Respect is key. We talk about engagement and consultation. Sometimes what I see is information. Engagement is about understanding the value set you're working within and responding to it. And that's what builds respect. It's a two-way street. And ultimately that trust is earned through that respectful relationship over time. And trust erodes quickly. And I'll loop back to that enduring partnerships. It's a cliche, but trust arrives on a donkey, leaves in a Ferrari. I've been involved in an incident this week where a long-term relationship of over 10 years has disintegrated on the basis of one interaction of a poor nature. So you cannot underestimate how important it is to maintain and tend those relationships. Recently, we've done some work in the gas sector looking at community sentiment. We got a group called Vaconic to undertake some community sentiment mapping out in the Surat and Bowen basins across southern and central Queensland, and talk to landholders who are particularly focused on finding landholders who are hosting gas infrastructure and talking to them about their experience. Out of that work came a concept we're calling the landholder journey. And I think it's an important one because it looks at stress and anxiety levels across the project cycle from a gas perspective. And I think you could probably sub any form of development in for this with this particular sort of concept, where we're looking at where are those stress and anxiety levels greatest, and how do people react over time as they mature in their relationship with the company. And what we found there very much is at that early stage where information is least, uncertainty is greatest, is where those stress levels are highest. So obviously that just emphasizes the importance of that early engagement and transparency. And you note there that there's a mellowing of the stress levels across time when you go through the planning and negotiation phase, construction, operations, and decom. Looking at this, and this is probably 6 or 7 months old now, I'm looking at that construction stage, wondering whether there might be a bit more of a spike there in terms of anxiety and stress levels. So that's kind of probably one of the things that I might starting to question about this as we move, as I sort of move through in some of the other industry areas. But it's an interesting insight into that kind of relationship over time across a project. We've also recently commissioned University of Queensland Centre for Gas and Energy Transition to do some work on leveraging the lessons of the onshore gas sector, and we're about to publish a report in the very near future, hopefully first week September. And I just wanted to hit on a few of the lessons coming out of that before I get into a bit more detail. If I look, and this is something I get asked a lot, what's the top 5 lessons learnt from gas that, you'd probably say to any other development industry coming into a rural and regional area, what are those things? And just quickly, some of the things coming out of that report, and these aren't things that you'd be surprised about, but the importance of early engagement and co-design of projects to build trust, minimise impact, maximise benefit. One that I think is undervalued is acknowledging and respecting people's time and business. Often community engagement is about engaging with busy people who have other things to do, and you're not, as a developer, you're not their sole. In fact, you're a peripheral interest to them, and that sometimes that's missed. I think managing cumulative impact is absolutely critical. Local content fuels that business growth and community empowerment, and legacy benefit is what it's all about. All right, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities. I think this is something that Wendy sort of asked me to focus on. From what we're seeing and hearing out there in the in Queensland, and I will say, and I was talking to Wendy about this earlier, I kind of feel like a little bit of a negative Nelly when I run through these issues. And I guess I just make the point that with an organisation like Co-Existence Queensland and in our previous iteration of the Gasfield Commission, people don't tend to come and talk to us if they're happy. It's very much I won't say a biased sample, but a sample of interactions that are driven by negative experience, which is just the fact. But what it does do is it gives us great insights into when things do go wrong. What are some of those things that we can do to correct or to enhance practices so those same things don't happen again? And I'm just going to run through a few things that I've personally observed and the team has observed that are opportunities and challenges, particularly in the renewable energy space. And I'll emphasise this again: early engagement is critical. It's landholders, it's community, it's local government. First impressions matter. Respect is key. Local presence. Some of the examples of really good engagement and good reputation in community I have seen have been complemented by or have been driven by our regional presence in that community and a real tactical contact point for community members in their patch. And this is something I think we were talking about before we started. Do what you say you're going to do when you said you're going to do it. I think in some of the things that I've seen go south, commitments are made, not honoured, communication is poor, and that really affects trust and relationships. There's plenty of good practice out there in that early engagement space, but there's definitely room for improvement. Next bit, partnerships are long-term. Again, I talked about it earlier. The work is not done when the agreement is executed. We've seen a lot of focus at the front end of project in terms of community engagement, even to the regulatory end. But I think we haven't necessarily focused enough on the patch that we're talking about today. That genuine partnership spans the life of a project, and relationships must be tended to, and it's not about leaning on agreement clauses. If there's an issue, sort it out. That's kind of that's the mantra that we encourage. Often that when you get into that realm of 3.4.8, you've lost the game already. And I'm sure you'll hear from Gary and Dana, but it's still early days, but there's plenty of learnings emerging. Unfortunately, sometimes the hard way, but plenty of good examples out there. Managing construction and ops is key. We know from our experience in gas, that is where the rubber hits the road. People don't really understand what construction looks like until it happens. And that's why it is so important. Noise, dust, traffic, road impacts, behaviour, driver behaviour, road damage, weather, notifications. All these things are absolutely critical. Land access, biosecurity, respecting rules of access on properties. How many times has the relationship gone pear-shaped because the contractor didn't really understand what the rules on that property were, and they've broken them, and that's resulted in a Barney. Understanding and being responsive to the needs of hosts and neighbours. I hear things like we're not responsive. In construction, there's no response unless it's a complaint. That's the kind of thing, the process we need to get out of, and proactive management of the interaction there, whether it's about facilitating business access to roads that are required by landholders that are interfacing with the movement of construction materials or kit. That's a real something that, if well managed, can endure relationships. If poorly managed, can break them. End of life. I think this is an area of emerging. We're getting there in terms of information. With Realigns has put some stuff out. So recently, we're putting some stuff out soon. But there's still a lack of understanding and awareness of statutory obligation, and that concerns statutory obligations and who holds the risk, and that concerns impacting potential host decision making. And it's also pervasive in the community narrative. One thing that I don't think gets enough attention and is a really important local issue is the community interest and concern in access to other natural resources in areas. Water, gravel, sand for construction, concern around landholder environmental impacts, lack of transparency, and no regulatory requirements to disclose. Water is a key example there. I hear a number of concerns around how a project's accessing water. We're concerned about the impacts of that in our local environment. My bore, has that affected my bore, that take from next door? These are things that we're very attuned to in other industries. And I think, as I say, there's no real regulatory levers in some of those areas for engagement with community around some of those issues, but there's an opportunity to really bring some transparency to that process and gain credibility by bringing some facts to the community about how those resources are accessed and how impacts are managed. Neighbour interactions, I think we see that time and time again. It's a significant source of conflict, particularly in highly populated areas, often driven by perceptions of lack of early engagement, particularly. And, we've got things bouncing around like neighbour payments and other incentives, which are both an opportunity and a challenge, because, it's not a level playing field there. And there's certainly a bit of opaqueness in companies, how they individually develop those incentive mechanisms around neighbour payments, or those that don't, and also the nuances of the community in which developers are operating in. Obviously much more challenging in densely populated areas where there are a lot of neighbours versus more rural and remote areas that don't have many neighbours and don't have those neighbour issues. Oh, sorry. And finally, community benefit. I think is something that we've seen big focus in Queensland, obviously a focus from a regulatory point of view, which again is creating another level of uncertainty and with new frameworks and how they're going to work and how local government are going to deal with those. What the span of that community benefit looks like coming out of social impact assessment. And I think, there's still those things around perceptions of boom bust cycles, employment levels, economic benefit, local content, which are things that we continue to hear about. So thank you for indulging me in exploring a few of those things. And just a concluding couple of statements. I think, from where we come from in Co-Existence Queensland, we span a lot of different industries in the whole state. But for us, those foundations of coexistence and social license are common across the industries. But they're obviously, all industries are at different stages of their development across the state. So there's a lot of nuance there. And there's no one size fits all approach here. There's no silver bullet. But we certainly have a lot of experience to lean on, us in the organisation, but collectively across this call, across government, across industry, across community. And we certainly, I think we know what best practice looks like, and there's plenty of opportunity to profile that. Information, a bit of typo there, and engagement is vital. We see things like independent facts, dispelling myths, and respectful engagement continuing to be foundational. I will talk again about partnerships. We all in this room play a role. There's no single entity operating in isolation that can create the environment necessary for social license and coexistence. We all have a role to play. It's just how we collaborate on that. And my challenge here is, we all know collectively what the issues we need to address are. The challenge is, and the opportunity is, to work together to positively address them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Warwick. There's a bit of chat in the chat box of some examples that people have seen, which probably aren't helping with coexistence, e.g. taking gravel from the local creek beds without a deal with the council. That probably doesn't go down so well. Thank you so much, Warwick. That was fantastic. We're going to keep going, and please keep the chat up, and we'll come back to some of those key points that Chris and Paul have raised there. Pop your questions in the chat box because we've got a fabulous panel coming up now. So firstly, I'd like to thank you, Warwick, and thank you, Dana and Gary, for joining Warwick on the virtual podium right now. Lou will spotlight us all, so we're all here together. I'm going to introduce you one at a time and throw you some questions, and then we will go to the floor for any questions that others have got. I might start with you, Gary. So I'll introduce you. So everyone, this is Gary Lees. He brings decades of experience working with landholders, developers, and communities across Queensland and New South Wales. His career has taken him from agronomy to managing farms to leading land access teams over the coal seam gas boom. He's also negotiated as a landholder on behalf of his family a wind farm project which is now under construction. Gary is involved in a farm near Jandowie where his family now hosts wind turbines and a substation, so he knows firsthand what it's like to balance energy development with rural life and a farm business. Now he's working as the head of regional development and relations at RELA. He's connecting landowners with developers through a first-of-its-kind online marketplace to create outcomes that benefit both communities and projects. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gary.
Thanks, Wendy, and thanks for everyone who's joined in. As Wendy said, my journey started as an agronomist working along the border rivers in New South Wales and Queensland. That experience gave me a deep appreciation for the challenges on the land and for the people that work it. I later transitioned into the coal seam gas industry in Queensland right at its infancy. and I worked there as a land access manager for many years. That role involved lots of negotiations, working closely with landholders and our engineers to place infrastructure on the land in ways that minimise disruption to farming operations. As Warwick said, it was about blind compliance then, and as it unravelled, as the industry matured, there was lots of social challenges we had to address too, not dissimilar to some of the experiences we're going through with the renewable development. And whilst I was there, I started negotiating a wind farm development on my in-laws' property. That was probably a 6-year negotiation and was in the vicinity of 20 to 25 agreements by the time we went through all the various iterations. That project now is under construction, and we'll go through some of those things shortly. And while undertaking that negotiation, that was a bit of a turning point for me. It made me realise how much potential there was, but how hard it was for landholders to engage meaningfully with the renewable energy sector. And that led me on a journey to join RELA, a company focused on helping landholders navigate the renewable energy transition, supported by information, fairness and strategic support.
So we're so lucky to have you here, because you have done the doing from a couple of different perspectives, Gary. So as a landholder and someone who supports other landholders, what are the opportunities that you see from hosting a project? Let's start there. Like, there's challenges, but there's also lots of opportunities.
Yeah, there definitely is, and certainly for our family farm, it's introduced an alternative income stream that's really helped fund infrastructure upgrades earlier than we intended. So from at a farm level, it's just transformational. It just gives us so many opportunities, but it also quite obviously buffers us from climate variable in terms of the farm operation itself. But really, it's not just about us as well. It's also about the broader community. And, you know, we've seen around the farm road upgrades. Local businesses have been engaged, and they're now actively involved with the project. And obviously, we've seen funding flow through to community initiatives.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you've also told me in the past that it's pretty cool to have those great roads around the farm too. So they're the opportunities. What are some of the real on-the-ground impacts that you've seen and experienced yourself during the construction phase?
Yeah, so for us, we could take all day here, but it's been a real mixed experience.
Summary.
We're very proud to be part of the project, but it has thrown up its own unique challenges. You got to remember, our agreements were negotiated 8 years ago, and you don't know what you don't know at the time. And we certainly didn't contemplate some of the project design and construction issues that we were subjected to. So our farm is sort of on that excellent mixed farming soil. So it's quite productive, well cleared and generally undulating. And really, when the construction commenced, I was very critical towards some of the construction techniques that weren't really conducive to maintaining the productive capacity and operation of the land. And really, going back to some of Warwick's comments, this is an expectation that we learned through the CSG boom, and what we were seeing constructed on our land wasn't replicated from those previous experiences. So, and more specific to our situation, the biggest issues we experienced was the disconnect between the project requirements and genuine coexistence with our farm operation. So when the project commenced, construction corridors essentially were handed over to the contractor to construct within. But those construction techniques didn't take into a full understanding of how the design of roads and pads and associated infrastructure would impact our farm operation. Things like the placement of key infrastructure, it impacted some of our water points. Where the roads were located within those construction corridors, they didn't take into account some of our existing contour banks, like some of our existing infrastructure like contour banks. It interfered with fences, cattle laneways, changing the way we had to operate the farm. And even things as simply as survey pegs, placement, how they stuck out of the ground, they weren't thought about, and drain designs and erosion control measures, just the way they were designed and placed and proposed to be left, it just wasn't conducive to a coexistence that was going to last for the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And all of these issues had real consequences for our business and the way we ran it. And unfortunately, each of these issues, they come at us one at a time, and they all had to be addressed individually. And it was so incredibly time consuming and stressful to get to a resolution. And then you layer on top of that a lot of the things that Warwick discussed, but there were the broader project requirements such as project requests. We also had ongoing simultaneous negotiations. There was concerns around traffic volumes. There was occasional poor contractor behaviour and adherence to our own land access protocols that all had to be dealt with. And at times, really managing that interface with the project was a full-time job. And like it is, we hear about landholder fatigue. From first-hand experience, it is a genuine, real thing. Like I was genuinely exhausted as we navigated all of these issues. But it's not all bad. Like on a positive note, the developer we're involved with, they certainly did come to the party after a while, and they acknowledged a lot of the issues, and we're now on a really good pathway to finishing the project on a shared understanding.
So thank you for sharing that, because I think that really, when you hear one farmer's version of what this is like for them, it really brings home this piece around we do have to partner with communities and individuals. Like there's a massive personal impact during that development phase. And we know all projects will run into issues, especially during construction. What do you think the best way for the people on the call? So we've heard that personal impact of some of the issues. What do you think the best way is to manage problems and prevent that emotional toll, I guess, of unresolved concerns building up over time? How do we stop people getting to Warwick with a complaint?
Yeah, I think it's a prevention is better than the cure kind of approach. But there's two aspects to it, I think. Like from us as a landholder, there's no question that a strong agreement is essential to have, and to do that you have to build a good team around you. That's all your support network, lawyers, etc. And the agreement's not just a safety net for both parties. That's the landholder and the developer. It also drives good engagement and sets clear expectations. And also make your own plan. Like my lesson is make your farm plan central to that discussion. Don't let the project just do what the project wants to do. Bring your farm plan as part of the discussion. And that's just not a map, dots on the page. That's actually boots on the ground and having a genuine conversation about the location of infrastructure and how it impacts your land. And that's a big part of what RELA advocates for. We ensure landholders have an informed seat at the table throughout the project lifecycle. And the other thing that we really promote is landholders working as a group. So just don't go solely. Like it's a real support process to be working with your neighbours on a project. And that also helps alleviate some of the more broader neighbour issues that do arise. And I think as you go through a project as a landholder, if something's really not right, generally speak up. Because you don't want to accept second best. Like you're talking a 50, 60 year coexistence. So you want to make sure it's right as you go through that process. And obviously now we've got Warwick and Tony Marr and QFF, in Queensland. There's lots more support than we had as we went through our process. And on the flip side, for the developer, it's very much prevention's better than the cure. Most of the issues we face could have been avoided with more targeted engagement and thoughtful design. So I think the way these projects are constructed, there's a little bit of a think tank required around that, because the construction techniques aren't what we experienced conducive to coexistence. Where we landed is absolutely best practice, I think, but it took a long time to get there. And from the developer, when problems arise, like be accountable to address them, investigate each issue with an open mind and consider it from the landholder's point of view. Don't become positional. If the issue at hand generally impacts a landholder's property, which is generally always not intentional, don't stand behind the land agreement to defend your position or delay rectification works, because the issue just doesn't go away. If it's morally wrong, then step up and fix it. A landholder doesn't care about a project's costs or bureaucracy. They just want their farm corrected. And then the real turning point for us to finish up on is getting the right people in the right spot. The turning point for us was when the project employed the right landholder project representative, and he was given the authority to deal with our concerns. He understood agricultural operations and he understood our expectations. And he really genuinely understood engagement processes. He just wasn't a tick and flick exercise. These are the underestimated folk that bridge the gap between the project and the people living it, and they're critical to a project success. So my issue right now is, how do I wean my in-laws off a relationship that's been fostered with this new project team? Because it's really, you know, we really are ending on a good note, but it's been a really long journey. We can't turn back the clock, but there's lots of strong lessons that could be learned, and we're very happy to be part of this project now.
Thank you so much, Gary. There's a couple of questions that have come through for you, which we will come back to after we've heard from Dana. One of the things I'm interested in there is you talked about level of authority of the person that was coming and talking to you. That's something that comes up quite a bit. But let's go on to Dana, and we'll come back, and please keep those questions there. So please welcome Dana Boxall. You're getting to
think we lost Wendy there.
Yeah.
the GM of Community and Delivery
Okay.
Services for Powerlink Queensland. She brings over 30 years experience in the energy industry. She's done it all, working across financial, regulatory and delivery teams at Powerlink. She now leads a community and delivery services group, shaping how the company works with traditional owners, landholders, communities and other stakeholders. Recently, and very excitingly, Dana was recognised with the inaugural Women in Networks Award by Energy Networks Australia for her role in Queensland's energy transformation. She's passionate about making the energy transition socially responsible, sustainable and genuinely positive for the communities Powerlink serves. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dana.
Thanks, Wendy. Appreciate that.
Oh, look, it's awesome to come home after those two fellas. And let's talk first of all, because you work in transmission, and we've been talking about primarily generation development. What's the development construction phase look like? What's the difference between a transmission project and a generation project?
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly before I do start, I also would like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara people as the traditional owners of the lands on which I am joining this forum of today as well. So, but yeah, Wendy, there is I guess there is some key differences when we think about, you know, the development or the generation sort of project side and a transmission project. I mean, typically generation is probably, I would say, more of a confined footprint as such. There probably is that certain sort of landholders and you know, neighbours, etc., that you are looking to be working with. Whereas a transmission typically spans, you know, it's a long linear infrastructure, typically spans multiple, it can be multiple local government areas, multiple landholders, ecosystems, traditional owner groups, etc. So I guess just that the various complexities and stakeholder diversity that might come is certainly one of those differences. We also have different often regulatory and approval pathways as well that comes along with those differences. But I think in terms of, while there are those key differences, I think something that is really important was what's actually similar between the projects and what we really need to think about. That's, you know, sort of that shared foundations that we all have to work across for these projects. I mean, they are connected, literally. So I think it's, yes, I hope so. And I think that's, you know, really important. So I think there is some sort of underlying practices and foundations that we all sort of need to think about. We've talked a lot about that you've heard through Warwick and Gary's presentations around some of the importance and I guess those key principles that really sort of sit across our projects in terms of, you know, our stakeholder engagement, how we go about making sure we get the right mechanisms and channels and the right roles in place to support that, building that trust with all those stakeholders that we're working with, and having consistency across that. But I think the one key thing that I'd just like to call out, I guess, about, you know, what our projects are doing is we're about a shared goal, and I think that's got to be really brought out a little bit more in terms of when we're working. It's, you know, successful delivery for us and developers is about delivering reliable energy infrastructure for Queenslanders. And I think understanding that shared goal and how we do that in the way that does align and meet our community and landholders and environmental operational expectations is really key. And, you know, it's easy to roll off your tongue. Meeting all those expectations is not easy, but that's, I guess, the shared vision that we all need to continue to work towards.
The last Power Hour was around regional collaboration. We could talk about that all day, how we focus everyone on that same goal. Can I just go back to consistency? You mentioned it, and I think it's something that comes up a lot. We often hear it's a really big frustration. Gary mentioned it a little bit. For landholders and communities, it's not just during construction and development, but across the whole project life cycle. How do you think it's possible to achieve consistency? Because for the community member, for the individual, they don't care whether they're dealing with Powerlink or whether they're dealing with a developer. For them, the experience is the project in general. So do you think we can improve that, and what might that look like?
Oh, look, absolutely, we can improve it, and I think it's essential that we do that. It's not even a you know, should we? So I think that you know, I think it's one thing that I always think about is trying to put yourself in those shoes, or what would your own parents or family need to understand and know? What would be my expectations of these projects coming to me, and I think that that understanding about, while it's at times it is important for our own probably internal delivery aspects of having the differentiation between our organisations and processes. When it comes to those interactions and working with our community and landholders, it's really important that we come together for those and have that consistency, set that bar, because I think we've said it before, we're all seen as one at certain times, and so if one of us is dropping, then we all are, you know. So I think that's really important. I think something that I think Gary really probably called this out in his is that importance of those dedicated leads across and those connection points for the projects, you know, having dedicated engagement leads or your community relations presence and your landholder having those key contacts. And ensuring that, you know, you can establish those strong relationships. So because there will be issues, no doubt there'll be those times, whether they're, you know, as they're unintended, that have to be worked through. And I think the ability to have that strong sort of relationship bedded down is so important to, you know, the success of that. So I think that's probably a really, really important and key factor for us to consider. And it's that long-term relationships. Again, it's not just about getting an agreement in place or about getting, you know, for us, the poles and wires up. This is the operations long-term, you know, 40, 50 years of important relationship that is needed to be set up and get it right from the beginning.
We could talk about consistency across the whole life cycle all day as well. We don't have all day, so if you were going to give advice to an engagement practitioner stepping into a project at construction phase, what are your top 3 tips, Dana? And then we'll throw to some questions.
Oh, I think the first one is I guess probably touching on the what our role is and coming into the and understanding who we're working with. And I think that's really honouring that role as outsiders for, you know, the community and landholders in that first instance, and around introducing, you know, when we're out there, you know, essentially we are intruders in many ways. And I think really approaching that with respect and humility is really important in understanding the impacts that these have. And I think that understanding that, and again, it's easy to link back to what's happened before me. It was all the foundations were set there, but Warwick talked about the mutual benefits and the outcomes that need to come from these projects. It's really important that you know, we understand what that looks like. So, you know, and be honest and responsive, really importantly. I think the second one is probably just understanding the landscape you're going into, and that's probably of 2 areas literally. So let's actually make sure that before we get out there, we understand the terrain and the environment and exactly what's out there, but also socially, I think is making sure we understand the fabric of the community and and who we're going out to engage with, so we can approach that with the best intent and knowledge and approaches that suit that as well. So making sure we do know who that is. And then probably the third one is just making sure we do, create that shared vision and goal and get that alignment. Project isn't successful because we just have a couple of, of great people on the front line, or it's about all the voices in the organisation and on the project, understanding what success looks like, and ensuring that they understand the importance of our landholders and communities in all of our decisions as well.
Thank you so much, Dana. Okay, some questions from the floor. Gary Lees, are you ready? I've got a couple here for you, and we've got 3. You've got 3 minutes, Gary Lees. So, my friend, succinct answers. Did you have early discussions in the engagement about decommissioning and rehabilitation requirements?
So we had early discussions. I think, remembering, these agreements were done about 8 years ago, and I think both legislative and social expectations have changed a lot in that time. So without delving into too much, I think there is some deficiency in some of those arrangements for those historical agreements.
Okay, good job. So do you feel that the compensation agreement paid for your personal time? Because you all those years.
Yeah, absolutely not. So I think landholder time is well and truly underestimated for these particular projects, particularly when things don't go as well as intended. So there is absolutely room for industry to improve in that space.
And last one for you, did you raise and pursue every issue? And did the developer ever anticipate challenges and come to you proactively?
I think, so did I raise every issue? Absolutely. Particularly where it was going to impact our property. I think after a while, the developer realised some of the activities weren't conducive to co-existence, so there was a little bit of proactive engagement. However, again, it came back to that right person who truly understood, what construction processes were going to have long-term impacts to our land. But trying to resolve those processes through a large organisation was the difficult part.
But did I hear you right by saying once you got the right person who understood your business, took the time to learn about you and understood the development business and had the authority, that improved that proactive?
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's
fantastic.
correct.
Thanks, Gary. Okay, one for you, Dana. How are you, and you've got a couple of minutes to explain a very big thing, but how are you integrating the engagement with the SIA, the social impact assessment?
Yeah, great. Look, I'll approach this from hopefully I'm understanding the context of where we're trying to get to, but I think the understanding, and it comes to that, probably understanding the social fabric as well, and understand the impacts of projects that do have on communities is informed right the way through. So trying to do early community insights. We've got a new transmission easement engagement process that looks at understanding these, understanding those communities very early on, so that we can inform, before we actually sort of put boots on the ground out there. So it's important to understand and be informed all the way through the engagement. The social impact assessment, I guess, in its more formal term, is an understanding of actually understanding those impacts of projects around, items like housing, infrastructure, etc. And there's an actual process that goes behind that. But that's certainly not the only element that's used to understand, what those impacts are, and ensuring that when we are looking at what those, mutually beneficial outcomes are for the project, it's capturing what they are as well through delivery of, broader community investment, social value pieces, etc. So I'm hoping, Andrea, that's captured what you were after there, but I'm happy to take another question if we're running out of time offline and chat at any point.
Thank you so much, Dana. I just want to throw to you, Warwick, quickly for one last 1 minute comment just around, we've got the wonderful Paul Cranch on here, chucking lots of things in the chat box. And obviously his focus is councils. They can be, they're the first, they should be the first point of contact and sometimes aren't. What are your thoughts around the importance of working with councils?
Oh, couldn't agree more, Wendy. They are a critical window into the values that exist within a community. And in all my, probably the first bit of advice I'd offer any company when we meet is to go and talk to local government. Doesn't matter where you are in the development cycle, go and talk to local government. They can be your greatest ally. But if that engagement comes too late and community sentiment has already built against, there's a real risk there for projects. They also have extremely knowledgeable and well-connected staff in the operations areas, particularly I use roads as an example, and that is a really key relationship during that construction phase, ensuring good good outcomes as far as road upgrades, access, that kind of thing. Council's an absolutely fundamental player there at an operational level.
Thank you so much for your time, your experience, your wisdom, your lived experience. Gary was invaluable in this conversation today. So thank you, Warwick, Dana, and Gary, for volunteering. Answering the call might be a better way of wording it, to be part of the session today. I'd like to quickly hand over to Kiara from Powerlink. Kiara is the Manager of Project Engagement at Powerlink Queensland, and I'd like to invite her to the virtual podium to share her insights from the session today. And I'm sorry, Kiara, you're down to 2 minutes because we've had too much fun.
No, that's fine. Thanks so much, Wendy. Look, on behalf of the audience today, many thanks to Warwick, Gary and Dana for sharing their really valued insights and experience. Look, really quick recap. So Warwick, I guess, looked at the fact that we have to be moving beyond the mitigating impact lens and making sure we are genuinely trying to leave our communities in better places than when we came with our projects. So behaviour and outcomes need to go well above compliance. Challenges and opportunities, it's about early engagement, partnerships across that whole project life cycle, managing construction impacts, including natural resource impacts, considering neighbour interactions and community benefits as well. From Gary's point of view, it was excellent to hear, Gary, your first-hand experience on both sides of the fence as a landholder and also as a former land access manager. So thanks for being so open with your experiences. I guess the things that you really highlighted to us, Gary, were about some of those challenges with, practical integration of projects on farming properties. So how we need to be, better planning at a really pragmatic point with, water, roads, fences, compatibility with farming activities, monitoring and addressing poor contractor behaviour. So being really thoughtful and listening in how we deliver our work. And then Dana, I guess you really reminded us all about that shared goal and vision, that we're all on the same page. We're trying to deliver energy infrastructure safely and reliable for Queenslanders here. We need to have empathy and to keep it real, to think about what it's like if our parents or our families or friends were experiencing these types of projects on their properties. And then, at the end of the day, approaching our work with that absolute respect, empathy, honesty, and humility. So good reminders for everyone on the call today. Back to you. Thank you very much, Wendy.
Oh, thank you, Kiara. I knew you would nail that so perfectly. That was beautiful. We should be getting you to write that up for us. It was so good. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this 4th Power Hour virtual forum. I hope that you're leaving with some key insights and a bit of inspiration for the work that you're doing, or even an inspiration for a further conversation. If there's something today that sparked your interest and you want to talk to me about further, I'd love to have that conversation. This is really important and a really important conversation that certainly we need to have more of. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you once again to our partners, Powerlink and WindLab, for their support of this series. The next session is in September on the 18th, and the topic we're exploring is community-driven energy projects. So I really hope that you can join us. We'll be sending out the link to this session. We encourage you to share it with anyone that you think would be interested or benefit from learning a little bit more about the challenges and opportunities of development and how we can build these partnerships better with our communities to ensure that there's better outcomes for everyone. So once again, thank you for joining us. Hopefully I'll see you next month, and have a great morning, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks, Wendy.